My name is River Navai, and I use they, them pronouns.
And my name is Kayla Jones, and I use she, her pronouns.
And we are the moderators, organizers of the group and community, Collectivize Monterey County.
Yeah, so we'll go into our mission statement later, but first we wanted to start the show with a moment of silence for, we're starting with a moment of silence for the trans women of color killed so far in 2018. There's 4 of them, and the first one's name is Krista Lee Steele Nudsleen. Steele Nudsleen organized and produced the Miss Trans New England pageant and other pageants, and was loved and known by many in both the local and national trans community. Vicky Gutierrez, friends describe her as a young trans Latina immigrant woman whose warm smile could give anyone comfort. Tanya Harvey, a friend of Harvey's, expressed condolences on Facebook and wrote, "I knew her since I started transitioning. She was so sweet and loving." And Celine Walker, and it was not known for several days that Walker was trans because local police claimed to not refer to victims as transgender, and investigators are still looking for a suspect in her death.
Our moment of silence, or minute of silence, is also going to go out to the 17 victims of the recent shooting in Parkland, Florida, and their names are Alyssa Alhadef, Martin Duque Anguiano, Nicholas Dworet, Aaron Feiss, Jamie Gutenberg, Christopher Hickson, Luke Hoyer, Kara Lugren, Gina Montalto, Joaquin Oliver, Elena Petty, Meadow Pollock, Helena Ramsey, Alex Schachter, Carmen Schentrup, and Peter Wang.
And we will also observe this minute of silence for victims of police violence, and unfortunately there are too many to name. So, moment of silence.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Yes, thank you for observing that.
Yeah. So we'll start by laying out our mission as Collectivize Monterey County. And I don't have notes for this, so I'm kind of going to go on the fly.
That's cool.
Collectivize Monterey County was founded by Kayla Jones as a community on Facebook where our essential goals is to create a space both online and in real life where folks of color can have their needs met outside of a traditional capitalist system where you have to work to get money and you got to spend the money to get the resources. And we live in a very plentiful, wealthy area, and we have seen that there are plenty of really generous people and you know, generous, well-meaning white folks who want to do their part, our part, in dismantling white supremacy as well as supporting our neighbors of color. But there's not always a
intersectional
groups where people feel welcome. There's not always, I guess, a platform to facilitate that happening.
And I think in a lot of the local activist groups, we kind of touched on this a little bit before, but very few are operating from kind of like an anti-capitalist standpoint. I hardly ever hear that, and so we feel that that's really important to have be our root and our foundation. So
yeah, we have anti-capitalist values, and if you have no idea what that even means, I really strongly recommend a book that's called Anti-Capitalism. It's actually an illustrated book, illustrated by a group called Ilustradores Unidos, if that's correct. It's a South American group. And I don't have the author's name off the top of my head, but if you look that up, you will find a really awesome guide to, and it's like $3 on Amazon, so go now. And if you can't get one, why don't you make a post in our Facebook group and say, hey, I want a copy of this. Anybody willing to throw down for one?
That would be awesome. Yes. And you know what? Actually, let's try and avoid Amazon, because Amazon is like super evil. So let's not do that.
Yeah, did you know that the majority of Amazon employees working at full-time are on food stamps?
Yeah.
Yet food stamps will not be accepted at the new Amazon markets.
Yeah. Yeah, and for more dystopian tales from the Amazon warehouse, their new corporate building, they call it like a rainforest, and it's like all glass, and there's like trees growing up in the middle, and it's like super like environment. It's great for the white collar workers, right? And then you have the blue collar workers that I think their turnaround time is like 6 months working at Amazon, and then they either die or have to quit for health reasons. Like there was this huge expose that was done on this. It's so wrong. So
there's one standard in the offices, a whole nother in the warehouses.
Right. So now
Should
we
we
want
check
to yes. So we do check-ins. River called them roses and thorns. So roses are something good that's happened since our last show, and thorns are something bad that's happened since our last show. And we're laughing because
so much. I mean, on both spectrum, ends of the spectrum. But
yeah, do you want to start?
Sure. My rose has been opening my show, Fun Home. It's a musical being performed at Pacific Repertory Theater in Carmel this weekend. I actually have a show tomorrow night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, and then again next weekend.
Awesome.
But it's been a really rewarding process so far, and it's been well received. So that's been my rose.
I'm super excited to see it. I haven't seen it yet. I feel like I should have been there on opening night or something because it's River, but no. I'm sorry, but life.
The show only gets better as it goes. So.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Thorn for me, I don't know. Do you want to share a rose first?
Yeah. God, what would be a rose? My daughter turned 4.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah.
She's so sweet.
So Violet turned 4, and we launched Rebel Scouts.
Yes.
That is super exciting. Yes. I've been working on Rebel Scouts for, I don't know, like 6 months, I think.
Since you came up with the idea.
So, and I have flyers, and it's on our Facebook page and in our Facebook group, more details. But
do you want to tell us what it is?
Yeah. But Rebel Scouts is loosely based off kind of like Girl Scout, Boy Scout type organizations, but no affiliation because I don't want to get sued. But they're loosely based off that type of structure, and it's a group of 5th to 7th grade Monterey County kids from everywhere. I would love to have some kids out in like South County and Carmel and kind of have like a mix of communities. And they are committed to promoting principles of social justice through praxis in their communities and education and events and things like that. And we're taking applications, and we take applications and do an interview process with the potential scout and parent, because we want to make sure that there's going to be no surprises, and that if we're doing a unit on like LGBT issues, we don't have a parent that's not expecting that, and that's going to go like totally against what they feel comfortable sharing with their child. So it's not so much an interview based on like, do you deserve it? Yeah, but it's more of an interview like, this is what we're going to be talking about, and what's your comfort level. And we're taking applications until I will announce at the end of the show.
Yeah, we'll talk
until
about
like March 17th at 5 p.m.
Yeah,
yes.
That's really rosy though.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So I'm super excited for that, and they're gonna look so cute with their little vests, and little berets and stuff, and little patches. They earn patches like the History of Rebellion patch, and we'll talk to like elders in the community and stuff like that. It's gonna be awesome. So cool. Back to you for the thorn.
Okay. All right. So my thorn, I suppose, has been, I've been stretched pretty thin. Being in this show, it takes up my nights and my weekends, and so I felt like I haven't been delivering as well as I should be in the classroom. But I'm working on that. And it's also an emotionally draining show. I'll tell you a little bit about the premise of Fun Home. It's about the life of real-life lesbian cartoonist Alison Bechdel, also creator of the Bechdel test. And it kind of takes a non-linear, circular kind of look at her childhood and her college years, coming out, discovering her sexuality, and her relationship with her father, who she finds out when she comes out that he is also gay or bisexual. He's married to her mother, but he's been having affairs with men and even underage boys for the whole time they've been married. And you find this all out at the beginning of the musical, so I'm not spoiling you. But the rest of the musical, you're watching me. I play older Alison Bechdel as she's writing her memoir, Fun Home. It's based on her memoir, her graphic novel. Kind of trying to piece together the loose ends of, well, why was my dad, doing this, and what happened here and there? Because 4 months after she came out and they discovered his sexuality, he was killed by stepping in front of a truck. And so I have to go through that emotional arc every night and basically watch my dad commit suicide. And so that really brings a lot out of me. And I've had to just practice really hardcore self-care and establish boundaries with people who are not so good for me, and just kind of examine how friendships and relationships can become toxic. And some of that's me, but setting a boundary keeps me safe from that kind of, from bringing the emotional damage from the show into my personal life, I guess.
And I was laughing about the roses and thorns because we had talked about this a lot this week. And my same thorn is that I am not very good at setting boundaries with friends, I guess. I don't know, if I'm really close to you, then sometimes it feels kind of weird to set boundaries. And so we were just realizing that a lot of stuff that we tell other people in kind of activist circles not to tolerate, and we're super feminist, who needs men, right? And then we're like, oh God, we fall into it too. And so we were just talking about why do we don't allow certain behaviors in our activist groups and when we're talking about social justice, but then when it's one-on-one, it's oh, what?
we allow and excuse behavior in our own personal lives, our own personal relationships. So working on that for the future. Check?
Yeah.
Check. Okay, cool.
So now moving on.
What's new? Whew, so much has happened since we met last on January 30th.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know what? I'm just going to mention it briefly. We don't have a picture, but they can Google it because it's hilarious. But what's new is this whole Nefertiti Cheddar Man thing. I don't know if you heard about it, but we all know who Nefertiti is, and we all know that she's black. And Cheddar Man was this skeleton that was found some odd years ago that they've been doing testing or whatever to see how old he is, and they scraped bone fragments off to.
It's one of the oldest early human remains.
Yes.
And it's found in Britain.
Yeah. It's 10,000 years old, and so they were scraping bone fragments to see what his eye color is, what his skin color is, and
DNA.
Yeah. And originally they assumed that he was white because he was in Britain and evolution. So they just kind of assumed that he was white. And then it turns out that he's very black. By today's standards, he would definitely get followed in a store. And then Nefertiti, the Today Show, came out, this was 2 days before we found out about Cheddar Man. And they said, oh, this is a bust of Nefertiti that's very accurate. And she was very white. And so it's Nefertiti is older than Cheddar Man by a lot, and yet.
And lived in North Africa.
Right. But somehow she was able to survive with very white skin. That just, Google that, and it's just, when we kind of go into why representation matters later in the show, that's just a really good example of how black people are just kind of erased from our history of we had, civilizations, and we had rich, cultures, and they like to kind of reduce us to, I guess, savages in Africa until the white saviors came. And so
it's whitewashing to the
It
utmost
is.
degree to say, oh, so there's this, really old early human in Britain, and make all these art. What do they call them when it's a rendering of how he would look,
Yeah.
and he's like white with brown hair and a beard, and then they look at his DNA and they see how much melanin he has, and it's like, oh, that can't be.
Right.
Yet they're so happy to take this
Yeah.
North African Egyptian.
They just can't
Queen
see us as ever being royalty or ever being that advanced to have queens and things like that. So, yeah, and the way they did this whole like DNA, I don't even know what it's called, but whatever they did with the bone scraping was more accurate for Cheddar Man than it was for Nefertiti. And she's way older. So just the whole thing, I was like, really? During
Look it
Black
up.
History Month, you have to do that? So
You got to see the pictures.
yeah.
Just look up Cheddar Man versus Nefertiti, and you'll find gold. So, continuing our conversation about current events, a huge event that happened this past week was, of course, the school shooting in Parkland, Florida high school.
Yes. And so, why don't you start, actually?
Okay,
and I'll-
I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this.
I know.
And I've been having conversations with my students in the classroom, and I was surprised to hear from them that they hadn't talked about the shooting at all in any of their other classes. Some of them said, oh, we talked about it for 5 minutes within one of my classes. And if that's not a mark of how our public education system is failing, I don't believe it's the teacher's individual fault necessarily, but if we are so stressed to teach to the test and get this assignment done that we can't spend our educating hours covering the world that these students are going to be entering in a few years or this year, I just think that's a mark of a failing on our part, honestly. So I'm going to work more to make sure I cover current events, even though I teach a drama class. Theater has always through the ages been a mirror to hold up to society. So I want them to take the tools we provide in acting to become your own, like come into yourself more as a human, but also the tools of theater that is being aware of the society and why this play now. That's why Fun Home is such a relevant play, being about queer issues. Anyway, okay, getting off topic. So.
Well, I wanted to say something too. I was going to add to the whole student thing, because something that is really, really pissing me off are these like disgusting right-wingers saying that these students that are organizing after the shooting and being incredible and, just being awesome, and they're organizing walkouts and protests, things like that, they say that they're being paid by the Democrats, or that they're actors or agents or things like that, which you should say what you said earlier about.
Well, there's a
NRA,
post that I read that said, funny how all these, GOP representatives are being paid in the millions by the NRA, and then they want to accuse a group of teenagers, high school students, literal children, in the eyes of the law, of being paid by the Democrats to speak out against guns. They're being paid to speak in favor of guns.
Yeah.
Even if those are their beliefs, they're not turning away those checks from the NRA. So
right. And I don't know why they're kind of, it really bothers me that these adults are kind of saying like, well, what do you guys know? And oh, well, you should just, they're just playing politics, or they don't know how the real world works. And it's like, they just saw like 17 of their schoolmates and teachers die in front of them.
And 14 others be wounded into the to the hospital.
Still in the hospital in critical condition, and they don't have the right to speak out. And I think
they don't understand.
Yeah, which it's very easy to say that, I guess, and just kind of write off what they're saying. I think it's kind of gaslighting too, honestly, to say that they don't understand what's happening and it's happening in front of them. And students have been in the center of political movements forever. I mean, I think the very first one was like in the 1600s in I think it was in England. It was these students organizing because they said the food was bad at the college, and the dean was like, spanking girls or something like that. Like it was like really like definitely fit in the time period. But that's when the first students like organized.
Yeah,
And
students organized for the French Revolution as well as the American, and students
Civil
in
rights.
UC Berkeley and all the
against the Vietnam War. Students have been in the cornerstone of every political movement, and so they're just following the legacy. So.
And we are not anti-higher education, by the way.
Yeah.
We're not, what was the word?
Our ambivalence towards higher
Ambivalence
education
toward
was
higher education. We're just critical of
quoted.
it. We're critical of it.
Yeah, which I think is fair.
Yeah.
So also on this whole Florida shooting thing, something that I haven't seen talked about really anywhere outside of like my typical like I follow like Son of Baldwin and Kinfolk Collective, which can kind of be iffy sometimes, but some of like those like Black think piece writers and journalists and stuff, I've seen them talking about this, but no one else. Just about the whole, there is definitely a huge like white supremacy aspect of this shooting, and it's what I've heard. I've heard people blame so many different reasons for why the shooting happened, and it's
gun violence, mental illness.
Which there are tens of thousands of Americans living with mental illness that don't kill people, right? Like that's a scapegoat. Or they say that they were being bullied, which you're totally just blaming the victims of the shooting, and you're blaming the survivors and somehow saying that they bullied somebody into committing
they
this
shouldn't
murder.
have ostracized him from their community.
Yeah, and I think what we're not looking at is the fact that most of these mass shootings are committed by white males in typically affluent suburban communities. And I think part of it is just that, and you know, these shooters can be like very angry, and they idolize and glorify other white male mass shooters. And I think that that we kind of, men in general, but very specifically white men, are kind of raised to feel that the world is theirs to be conquered, and you know, you're gonna go out there and you're gonna have girls and you're gonna be successful in your career and you're just gonna rule the world. And then when that doesn't happen, they, you know, when they go to school and they're not popular and girls don't come after them and whatever, they get so like violent, and it either plays out in like violence towards family members or girlfriends or partners, or violence towards themselves with, you know, self-harm or trying to commit suicide, or violence like mass shootings. And so I think until we, I don't know, like reframe the conversation of like, this is toxic masculinity, this is white supremacy, it's
white male rage.
It is,
and that's
a thing. That's a thing, right?
And you know, we started our show with a moment of silence for the trans women of color killed this year. Why do you think they are targets of violence? Why do you think there were like 30 killed last year in hate crimes?
And we see gun violence play out very differently in different communities, because in brown and black communities, in places like Oakland or Inglewood or even Salinas, some of that gun violence, it's very obvious that it's due to like socioeconomic forces, right? It's like, are the schools well funded? Do people have access to transportation? Is it reliable? Do they have access to healthy foods that don't cost an arm and a leg at Safeway? Do they have opportunities for youth and activities for youth? And when they don't, this like tension and aggression and sadness of poverty turns in on itself, and then you have gang violence. But it's just interesting because these communities are so segregated because of white flight, which is white people being afraid of like living in communities of brown and black people. So they move to the suburbs, and I think they think they're so safe from the people of color that they can't even recognize potential violence in their own communities. And that's why they're always shocked that, oh my God, how could this happen, right? And it's just, I don't know.
This town was supposedly the safest town in Florida and the safest school in the town.
And what does that mean? What does safest mean? Does it mean farthest from brown and black people? Like who knows? What is that scale?
If you have not been following much to do with the Florida shooting, there's a couple things I want to speak on. One is that this shooter may have had mental illness. He certainly had a difficult home life, losing both of his parents to death. And we can take those personal factors into account. But this person was on the internet loudly saying that whites are superior. He was saying that Muslims are terrorists. He was, I read some quotes, and it was against everybody. He had toxic kind of alt-right ideology that radicalized him, and he got that on the internet, most likely, and through his personal experiences.
Breitbart.
And the population of the school that he attended was 40% Jewish. And he was said to have joined this group called Republic of Florida, which is a white separatist, paramilitary, proto-fascist organization that on their website proudly claims they want to create a white ethno-state in Florida. He did a training with them, they said, and they were not fans of Jews or women. And the leader of this group is a person, last name Jareb, J-A-R-E-B, who said, I'm not trying to glorify what he did, but he was pretty efficient, and he probably learned that at our training. Nobody we know told him to do that. He just, went crazy on his own. And then he, later that day, redacted all his statements saying that he had been tricked by the lying Jew media.
Which I feel like he just outed himself, right? You can't say that you were tricked by the lying Jew media and say, oh, we didn't tell him to go attack this.
Like, go attack Jews.
Jewish
Yeah.
That is so, that doesn't.
So it's difficult. And I feel like the media tends to try to skew us one or the other ways of either gun control or mental illness. And both are huge issues we need to resolve in our country. But this was a hate crime of a huge degree. And this man was legally allowed to purchase guns. And nobody at the school was surprised. If you haven't watched Emma Gonzalez's impassioned speech at a rally,
She's amazing.
Look up Emma Gonzalez and her speech, because she's a high school student who is one of the people who's now spearheading a movement that they're calling #NeverAgain. They want this shooting
and March
to
for
be...
Our Lives, too.
And March for Our Lives on March 24th. Students are going to walk out. Unfortunately, Seaside High will be on spring break.
Aw, man. Well, we actually have a local event planned at Window on the Bay in Monterey.
Oh, great.
Just go on Facebook. I'm not sure who is organizing it. I think it may be the CSUMB Women's March people, but there is going to be a local event.
Great.
And so the other thing off of that I wanted to mention, when we say like white boys are kind of raised to think that everything is theirs for the taking, I'm not just pulling that out of nowhere. This group of professors at the professors of psychiatry and public health at the University of Michigan found that though white Americans tend to be like the healthiest group in America, like physically healthy, they are on average far less mentally healthy, and they're less resilient than Black Americans and other people of color. And I like what they said. They said it seems that vulnerability is a cost of privilege, and resilience comes as a result of adversity. And they said across several studies using nationally representative samples of Americans, they found that white Americans are more vulnerable to the effects of risk factors such as low education, anger, depression. They turn violent when they feel a loss of control over their life. So there's definitely...
There's research to substantiate this.
Right, right. So,
yeah. Well, keep following what those high school students are doing, because it seems like they are not going to lay down quite so easy as we have continued to do. School shooting after school shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting.
And April 20th also, I think that's going to be the walkout, because what I read is that in March they're going to do a walkout for 17 minutes and then come back for like 1 minute for each victim.
Right.
And then there's going to be marches as well. But April 20th is the date I've seen for when they're going to leave and say we're not coming back to school unless something's done, which you know, school districts are going to lose a lot of money when there aren't kids there to count in the morning.
Yeah.
So,
hey man, the bus boycott worked.
yeah.
Yeah, and another think piece that I saw was about how a national teacher walkout could really change the game, and
I really hope so. It's been making me so happy because online I have friends like on the school board and friends that are teachers. I'm seeing these teachers organize and they have Facebook groups, and they're like, I'm so excited for that. The teachers and the students need to be together on this.
for as much as the internet causes mayhem in some corners and radicalizes alt-right white men, it's a powerful organizing tool for the resistance as well. So
Right, as much as they
join
try
our Facebook
and
group if you're not already in it.
yeah, as much as Facebook tries to sometimes, I would say all the time, suppress the voices of people of color. I don't know if you know, but you can't say white people on Facebook anymore if you're a brown or black person, because if somebody reports your post, you get suspended for 30 days. It happens a lot. So we've had to come up with clever ways to type white.
The YT.
Yeah, don't out us.
Never mind. Never happened.
Right.
Okay, well, we should get into why representation matters. That's the title
Yes.
for our episode this month,
Yes.
because we just did a super awesome project that was very successful. Thank you to everybody who gave to
Yes.
our Black Panther Ticket Fund.
And we didn't even know that there was apparently a hashtag Black Panther Challenge out there.
Yeah.
But it was great. And I guess that groups all over the country, just like what we did, raised enough money to send 23,000 people to see the Black Panther movie. And we at least sent, I think, like 54 people.
54 people
Yeah.
we sent to see Black Panther.
Which is awesome, like entire families and kids.
Yeah.
And we gave the NAACP Youth Council tickets. We gave the AKA sorority at CCUMB tickets. Some of the brothers, also, I can't remember the name of their fraternity, but some of the brothers got tickets. It was just so great. So thank you, CMC community.
Yeah, thank you. It was really successful. And so a big part of the reason we wanted to do that is because it's just so important for Black people, and especially Black kids, to be able to see themselves represented on screen in a way that's not dehumanizing, you know? But there's so many examples we could cite of representation that's actually pretty poor and backwards, but this is something new.
Yeah, and I feel like Black film like begins with slavery and like ends with Boys in the Hood. So it's like it's always like really tense and like traumatic, and I don't want to see like this. Why would I
those
go?
stories should be told.
Right. But when that's the only story being told, I mean, this movie gave Black kids an opportunity to see themselves in like a futuristic aspect. We weren't in Africa in a hut. I mean, it was amazing. Africa does have cities and countries that are advanced. They're not all in huts, but to see it for the general public and for them to get to see Black people in this like beautiful surrounding and not playing those roles that kind of like sit in your subconscious, and then you see Black people as kind of inferior. I think that was just so amazing.
Not to mention just like representation as a superhero.
Yeah.
And the just unapologetic Blackness of the movie. It's
Everyone
like
was
everybody
Black.
on screen is beautiful.
And I love it because throughout the movie, like whenever one of the white people would talk, they would just like call them colonizers, or there's a scene where the white person starts to talk and they just go ruff, ruff, ruff. They just bark.
I saw a tweet that was
we
like,
start
we need
doing
to
that?
we need to start barking at white people who speak out of turn. I saw that.
It was so funny, and they're just like, oh. And when they were called colonizer in the movie theater, I don't know, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it was funny, and everyone laughed. It's not like anybody was like, boo, but it was just really nice to hear white people be referred to as colonizers at that level. Like the whole world got to hear white people are colonizers.
A white American.
Yeah. And another thing that I loved about it is it was so, there's a scene, right, where like the white CIA agent, and I'm not spoiling anything, but the white CIA agent, he's talking to King T'Challa. He knows that King T'Challa is a king. And he's just like, hey buddy, I'm doing you a favor here. Or he like hits him on the shoulder.
Like,
yeah, and it's funny because I knew it was up, but it's like the audience, and I've seen people say this online, was sitting there like, why? doesn't he know he's a king? And I'm like, it's his white arrogance. He's still, in talking to this African king, feels so confident in him being like an average white CIA agent that he can like tap him on the shoulder. And we see that all the time in real life. So I just thought it was really interesting that people got to say, oh my God, he's doing that because he thinks he's just a random black guy. Like, that's totally what that was.
Even though he knows.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the most like beautifully subversive aspects of the film, is that Wakanda has all these rich resources and technology and art and culture and everything, and everybody who's outside of that, especially the white folks, are looking down on, oh, what can this third world country even offer the rest of the world, which is such an outdated and problematic term anyway, third world, but
and what I really love too, and this is like the last thing I'll say, and we'll move on to more representation stuff, but I just really want people to realize that Africa as a continent is Wakanda. Africa is full of resources, and they have been pillaged. Africa has been pillaged and drained and mined, and it is modern Wakanda. Something interesting that I learned, my sociology professor, Anthony Villarreal, I hope he's watching. He probably is watching at MPC. He's amazing. But he was talking about how, I guess there's like this metal that they mine on the shores of like West Africa, and it's in every laptop and every cell phone and literally any piece of technology that you have, and you can only find it in Africa. And they are ruining shorelines.
that's vibranium.
Right. I was like, vibranium is so real, and you don't even, no one knows about this. So I will put this in the comments at the end. I'll go find out the name of it. But
I remember that. I think it's with a C.
Yeah.
And I think it's just such a beautiful look, this film, at how Africa could be and would be if it hadn't been robbed of resources.
And potential, and yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Also, real quick, wanted to give a shout out to, there's a new TV show on the CW called Black Lightning. I didn't realize this is actually a DC comic. I had never heard about it, but it's amazing. It's very similar to Luke Cage, but because it's a comic that came out in 1977, I'm going to say they're not copying or anything. But still, it's amazing, because if you don't have Netflix, you can watch Black Lightning. And for the first time ever, one of the show opens and there's a black lesbian couple like in bed, and clear, like, it's not like gross or anything, but clearly they're in bed. And I've never seen that ever before on TV. Whenever I see queer couples, I've never seen two black femme women like romantically or intimately. So that was super cool. So watch Black Lightning.
Representation matters.
Yes.
Should we take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break. And want to have our artist come on?
Yeah.
There he is. All right, let's take a break. We're going to get set up, and then our Santa Cruz artists, Dopeless and Werwisp, are going to do a song for us.
Yeah, great. Maybe we could even continue talking a little bit while they get set up.
Cool.
Yeah, is that okay? Cool. Let's see, should we talk about hair? Let's talk about hair.
Yes. I love talking about hair. So I don't even know how this, we weren't planning on talking about hair representation. This kind of just came up. But, God, I remember what it was. I was in Santa Cruz, and I saw this white woman come in with dreadlocks that were like past her butt and looked really gross. And I guess that there was a look on my face when she like came into this restaurant. So I was like, this is a health risk. But she comes into the restaurant, and I guess there was like a look on my face, and my friend was like, what? And I said, oh, I just, that's offensive. It's offensive for her to walk in here and like have dreadlocks that clearly don't work for her hair type, and she's white, and it's not okay. And so we talked about why that isn't okay, because my friend had never heard of like cultural appropriation or anything like that. And for me, I have to decide, and I know this is something too for my little sister, but when we want to have like our cultural hairstyles, when we want to have cornrows, or we want to have braids or locks, or all the different beautiful hairstyles that come with being black, we have to say, like, is it going to be worth the harassment that we get? Is it going to be worth being treated badly? I typically, I don't see it. I only see myself as Black, but I guess that I can pass sometimes as racially ambiguous. So sometimes people think I'm Latina or Filipina or whatever. But when I have like Black hairstyles, it is undeniable that I'm Black. And I have found myself experiencing this and being like, wow, not worth it. I'm just gonna go wear like my curly hair because this sucks. And so
So for a white person to be able to rock the dreads
and just be bohemian and hippie,
it's not just a matter of health concerns, because as I actually didn't know that Black people can have locks and take them out and wash them and put them back in. I did not know that because I only knew the white hair version, which is like mat this shit and back comb for as long as you, sorry, I don't know if I can say that on air, but you know, like mat it up until it's there forever, until you cut them out.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. I'm like, I mean, if white people were meant to have dreadlocks, then your hair would do that. Like if you, Black people can start like the dreadlock twist journey, you can wash it, you don't have to cut it when you don't want to have them anymore. I mean, I guess you might, because sometimes they can get really long, but like white people have to shave their heads if they have dreadlocks for too long.
And it's just a mark of privilege, because if Kaylee can sit here telling all of us, oh my gosh, when I wear unapologetically Black hairstyles, I get treated noticeably different. I get harassed more. Yet a white person can walk into a restaurant or anywhere they want with their dreadlocks and not be criticized because they can just ride their white privilege wherever. If a Black person is denied a job because their hairstyle is considered unprofessional, yet white people just want to do this to kind of like, oh, it's because I'm hippie.
And the Supreme Court actually ruled that it is not unconstitutional for a job to say to a Black person, you need to get rid of your braids, because they said, well, you can't change being Black, you can just change your hair. Even though that is how you take care of your hair. It's not just like a ponytail. It's not like that. That is a part of Black people taking care of their hair and being clean and an expression of culture. And so something that I try and do in my role, like sitting on the Seaside City Council, is, and I'm always very nervous, but I really try and wear Black hairstyles like whenever possible, whenever I have the money and time to sit for hours and get my hair done. But like I just had cornrows the other day, and it was so nice because we had this event at City Hall, and these younger than me Black girls came up to me and were like, I love your hair. And when I had braids, I went to a class at CSUMB and spoke, and this girl wrote me an email and she was like, we're braid sisters. And so even though I'm like really nervous, like, oh my God, I'm gonna look like too Black for some people, hearing from like my community and other Black girls and femmes that it means so much to see that, I'm just like, all right, I'll be brave, I'll do it for the culture. So
that's why representation matters.
Yes. All right, now we want to cut to Dopeless and Werwisp.
Yeah.
Thank you. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. You start to feel victimized. Part of you begins to die. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. You start to feel victimized. Part of you, there's already a safe password. Didn't even have to ask her. Who's this dude she's talking to? It's getting on my last nerve. Whenever I ask who he is, I'm getting different answers. Homie's coming to me, why not ask her like a man first? Think I didn't try that, she just fights back when I try and bring it up. I didn't write that, must be a blind bat. Okay, yeah, I see, Can't have other dudes, so I'm stuck with you. That's what my mind kept on running through. Didn't know you were talking about two people when you would say I love you too. Frustrated, slamming doors, lack think of your damn support. You were the woman of my dreams. Why can't I be the man of yours? Come on, please, I'm gonna leave from all my needs. But you want me? Why'd I guess all these weeds? Trying to plant seed amongst rotten weeds. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. You start to feel victimized. Part of you begins to die. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. You start to feel victimized. Part of you, the closest person's hard to trust. They're supposed to be part of us. That one situation seemed to get a fire started. Had me think about past relations. Never add up in that equation. Girl was never that elated. Always found someone else that's the greatest. Agitated, that's just great, man. Now look at my self-esteem, man. I hate this, no debate, man. I'm still stuck, she gets to leave, forgetting me. Well, I fall deep like season with sunset and leaves. Now I'm wishing I was him. It's her face he gets to see. Maybe it's the fact I get clingy way too easy. The way I'd always ask, hey baby, would you leave me? My life would get off track. She'd mean way more than breathing. Then I'm out on my ass. On the outside I'm left seeing. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. You start to feel victimized. Part of you begins to die. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. You start to feel victimized. Part of you begins to wait a minute, let me think on why I have created distance. Sometimes we hold on too long, don't see how painful it is. Abandonment hangs heavy. We carry that weight as children, holds us down. So when we're grown, don't think we can make a difference. That's how it was for me. Never thought I was good enough. Dude, it's tough when you can't even look inside. Find you to love, latching on to someone else, hoping they can fix you. The feeling of anguish gets you to the point where they can misuse. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies. You start to feel victimized. Part of you begins to die. It all begins with little lies. It all begins with little lies.
And we will hear more from them. They're going to close the show with one song. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So,
All right.
the last part of the show, we wanted to get into kind of the transgender versus transracial stuff, which I think is great because we were just talking about hair representation and cultural appropriation. And so this is great, you know, because like I'm Black and reverse trans, so this is a perfect, you know, this is a great setup. And so transracial, well, why don't you?
Should I talk about transgender? Or?
Yeah, and then.
Okay, so there's sometimes, even in the early feminist circles, there've always been people who have said, well, how can you be transgender? Because it's not like women get to choose to be a woman or choose to be born with whatever they're born with and then treated like pretty crappy by the patriarchy. And so for a while, and even reading Alison Bechdel's work, I was reading her early comic strips, Dykes to Watch Out For, and there was a scene that took place in a bookshop where they're having women poets reading their work, and they had a trans woman. And after the show, the main character, who's based on Alison Bechdel, Mo, one person comes up to her and says, "Oh, I'm so glad that you had somebody who's trans in here. That's so special and important in lesbian spaces." And another person came up to her and was like, "I can't believe you let a man in here. This is a women's space. It's not safe for us when there's somebody who has a penis." We don't look at it that way anymore. That kind of thinking is labeled trans-exclusionary radical feminism. So if you know any TERFs, just keep them out. Boundaries. But gender is a social construct, and there is a spectrum of gender identities. There's a spectrum of biological sex. It's not like there's a clear cookie-cutter man and woman. Most people have a vagina or a penis, and that is all we use to identify their gender when they are born as a baby. And that's not necessarily fair. And with things like hormone replacement therapy and surgery, people can actually biologically, transition from female to male. But I don't even like to say it that way, because you don't have to go on hormone replacement therapy or get surgery to be trans and to be the gender that you choose. Because while gender is a social construct, the same way that I would argue race is, we do live within a patriarchal system where femininity of all kinds is actually punished, and differentiation from your assigned gender is also punished. So for all the people who grew up little boys who were feminine, they were punished for that. And so when people claim that, oh, trans women, they still have male privilege, oftentimes trans women, even as kids, even as children, did not ever get that male privilege because they were not deemed masculine enough. So, and then same thing for, butch women or trans men, is that we are punished for going against gender norms. And while that's more acceptable now than trans masculinity is often much more acceptable by society than trans femininity, but even though there's power at play between men and women, transgender, it doesn't work the same way that you want to talk about transgenders.
Yeah, and also I think that with a trans person, like, you have an equal opportunity to be a trans man as you could a trans woman, to be non-binary, right? Like, that's your individual choice, and you have access to that. But this whole transracial thing is only for white people. And so transracial is something we heard, I think this was maybe 2.5 or 3 years ago, with that woman, Rachel Dolezal.
Rachel.
Who is still milking it. She's still milking it. And
making money off her books.
Yeah, and she has a calendar out if anybody wants to read the calendar. And I think she's selling do-rags now as well, which...
So tell us what Rachel Dolezal's deal is.
She is a white woman, and she grew up as a white woman in a white family, and then at some point in her life decided that she was going to be a black woman. And she was from Spokane, Washington, and she started perming her hair and tanning a lot and starting to look like a light-skinned, mixed-race black woman. And she became the president of the NAACP, which she could have done as a white person. I mean, the NAACP was founded by black people and white people, so that's not like she couldn't be the president. But she just decided that she was going to be black. And it wasn't until she was outed in a TV interview, I guess her parents finally had enough and said, no, she's blonde, she's very white, that this like TV interviewer or whatever said, is your dad black or is your family black? And she said, I don't understand the question, and just like walked off camera. And so she tries to say that she's transracial because she identifies as being a black woman. But again, that's something only a white person could do. I mean, I could not just say suddenly that I'm white. No one would buy that. Like, I couldn't, all the skin bleaching in the world would not make me white. It's not something that anyone can go back and forth or have access to the full spectrum. Only white people do. And I like to joke sometimes that, like, I would love it if next time I get pulled over or followed in a store, I could just say, clearly I'm a Caucasian woman and your attention is misdirected. But I can't do that. Only people like Rachel Dolezal can do that. And there's more out there. She just happens to be the name that most people recognize. So another thing that just, I mean, because I know that, like, people like to say that race is a social construct, and there is truth to that, but also race isn't just, like how you're perceived. It's not, you're not just black because you have like kinky hair or darker skin or a wide nose, because there are albino black people that are still black. There are white passing people like my daughter, and she's still black. And when you reduce it to just like genetic characteristics, it can veer into the eugenics area. When I would say that, like, identifying as black is not only, you have black features, but also you have shared cultural experiences, you have shared history, there's trauma. And being black, I mean, living as a modern, like, descendant from my ancestors, even in 2018, black people still feel the effects of slavery, because there have been studies done on the grandchildren and children of Holocaust survivors that found that the experience of the Holocaust was so, I mean, we know how awful it was. It was trauma. That it caused generational trauma. And so that completely changed the way their amygdala functions in their brain. It changes their DNA and makes them more susceptible to mental illness and things like that. And so you hear that from the Holocaust. Can you just imagine what 200 plus years of slavery, and then you have Jim Crow, and then you still have black people having to see themselves killed every day, like on TV, the type of trauma. And so Rachel Dolezal, to have none of that history in a single cell in her body, to just identify as a black person, just
because you like the culture?
Exactly.
Then share and celebrate the culture, but don't claim it for yourself.
Right. And there's ways to be respectful of that and have cultural exchange. Like when you are invited to partake in like an Indian wedding, right? And they say, wear a sari. That would be cultural exchange. It's not, but if you're just going to like slap a bindi on when you go to like Coachella, that's not okay. That doesn't make sense. And so the phrase that I really love when thinking about this transracial thing is the phrase existence is resistance, because it is, I know also for indigenous people, and my black family is indigenous, one part of my black family is indigenous to Jamaica, but the fact that we are still here, and in 2018 I get to just be like here living my best life, the descendant of slaves, that is a miracle. That is amazing.
An act of resistance.
Yeah.
It actually, if I may, it reminds me of, I was reading up on Afrofuturism for Black Panther, and something that I found really informative and poignant was when they said, we live in a society that profits off of the death and subjugation of black people and black bodies. So to envision a future where black people not only are surviving but are thriving is an act of resistance, and it's just, I'm so glad that there's at least something going on in Hollywood to hopefully continue motion towards liberation.
And have these conversations at home. I mean, if you, and with your friends, if someone is being appropriative, like call it out, you know. So we want to close with a blurb about next month.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on
Yes.
with us and with other partners of ours in the community.
Yes, so I'll start with what we're doing. So yes, I mentioned we are taking applications for the Rebel Scouts through March 17th at 5 p.m. I do have the poster that I will give you, and you can hold it up. And you apply online, and you can find the application on our Facebook group or on our Facebook page. We will figure out a date for our next show shortly and put it in the group and on the Facebook page.
It'll be in the last week of March.
Yes, last week of March sometime. March 25th at 11 a.m. at Tatum's Garden in Salinas, which is a super awesome ADA accessible, amazing park. We're having an event, story time with CMC in the park, and we're going to be reading the book, Yes, When a Bully is President, Truth and Creativity for Oppressive Times. And we're doing it in English and Spanish, and we're going to have activities for the kids and bubbles, and there's going to be worksheets for them to take home from the book, and they can make little protest signs to take to their next protest. So it's going to be a great event. We are going to start another ticket effort for A Wrinkle in Time, which comes out March 9th. I didn't even think about this for some reason. I loved this book and I'm excited, but I didn't know it was coming out so soon. So we are going to start that ticket effort Monday, February 26th through March 4th, and then we will fulfill ticket needs between the 5th and the 8th. And this one, we're saying we're just doing a ticket effort for kids. It's a
For
PG
kids,
movie, and yeah.
Yeah, Wrinkle in Time, it's a classic book. Main character, you said, has like...
I love her. She has frizzy, curly hair and like really bad teeth, and she was totally, the way she's described was me when I read this book in like 5th grade. And they never said what color skin she was, but on the cover of the book, she was always a redheaded white girl. And then they cast this little girl that looks like a better version of me when I was 12, but still looks kind of like me. And I just like lost my mind. So I'm super excited. So please, CMC community, come together for this effort. We'll announce in the group.
Yeah.
Also, before River starts in the other events, we wanted to give a shirt shout out.
Yeah.
So my shirt is from young black femme owned business Splendid Rainco. She's amazing. She's 19 and like totally kicking butt. And if you can't read it, it says, violets are blue, roses are red, the water in Flint is still tainted with lead. So, and her name's Latiwa Karate, and she's amazing. So.
And I actually bought a shirt from her Etsy shop as well, and that's Splendid Rain Co.
Yes, on Etsy and Facebook.
On Etsy and Facebook. And I bought one that's also Valentine's themed. It said, roses are red, Doritos are savory. The U.S. prison system is legalized slavery.
Yeah.
And it didn't come in the mail, so I wore my boyish shirt from Androgynous Fox.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, so a couple more events I just want to shout out. We've got a really awesome open mic coming up this Sunday night at the Multicultural Arts Center, Palenque Arts. If you have not heard of this it's so cool.
It's amazing.
It's in Seaside. It's in the heart of Seaside at Martin Luther King School on Broadway, just up from the fire department. And it's run by a dear friend of mine, Juan Sanchez. And we do a open mic there. Right now it's only once a month, last Sunday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. So coming up, our Palenque Voices open mic will be February 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. This is an open mic where we try to center the voices of people of color, youth, femmes, and LGBTQ people. But everybody is welcome when we have all sorts of different performers. It's just that we make sure to prioritize those voices over the voices of white men, essentially. But still, there's white men who perform. So come on out, and we'll be there. I'll be there. I host it, and it's only once a month, so don't miss it. 6 p.m. this Sunday night. We've also got some really cool events coming up at Old Capitol Books in Monterey. They've got a discussion series coming up in March called Thinking Critically About Society, and it's every Friday at 7 p.m. starting on March 9th and continuing through the 30th. Every Friday at 7, they'll be having conversations, thinking critically about society. I'm going to try to be there for all the ones that I can make. And then Families of Color, Monterey County, another one of our partners, another Facebook group you can join, Families of Color, Monterey County, is having a community swap this Saturday, 24th, yes.
Yes.
at 11 a.m. at Oak Newton Park in New Monterey over here. Community swap, you can bring anything from clothes to food to books, any toys, anything that you think somebody else might find value in
good condition.
that you no longer have value for. And that's basically one of our main ideals is sharing resources that we may no longer
Trading.
need. So they don't end up in landfills, they end up in the hands of people who need them. And then they'll also be having on March 10th a Dads Read Women's History Month event at 10 a.m. in the Marina Library. That's on Saturday, March 10th.
Great.
Cool.
All right, well, that is it, and we will close the show with Dopeless and Werwisp again. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for tuning in at home. Go ahead.
Don't recognize the place that I'm from. Oh, yeah, yeah. Don't recognize the place that I'm from. Wow, tell me what we're looking at. Crooked cast the promise the world, then they took it back. Look at facts, got police that don't know how to use a badge, protect and serve. Tell me how they're confusing that. Shooting blacks in cold blood, body cams, there's no luck. Still get paid, leave the world, gives no fucks. And you got the people who always try to justify it. I just gotta ask, man, how about your brother dying? Would you look the other way? What would your mother say if the guy that killed your fam walked to see another day? Let's put it in perspective, some of you don't really get it. They're supposed to know how to deal with no lethal weapons. Never been more ashamed, see no sun, it's pouring rain. You're supposed to be human, god damn it, you're the same as the person next to you. How can you sleep at night knowing this is normal shit? Man, this isn't right. Don't recognize the place that I'm from. Oh, yeah, yeah. Don't recognize the place that I'm from. Oh, yeah, yeah. Recognize the place that I'm from. Don't recognize the place that I'm from. Don't recognize the place that I'm from.
As I wake up from a bad dream, it's
I see clear. I didn't want to be here, but one thing that I see near is my future. I'm no longer a loser behind a computer. I'm just gonna rap. You can tell that I put my whole life behind that. I'm making sure that I'm lighting a fire under my ass. I don't think you can stay in my class. No, I'm the teacher, not just a preacher. I'm making sure that I'm gonna reach her. When I'm talking about my love, it is music, and those drugs used to be ruthless, but no, I'm not useless or worthless. I am so perfect. Doesn't matter if I am that person that sees the worth or not. I'm making sure that you never forgot what I'm going through, and I seem to know the truth when you show the proof that you are human too. And I'm sorry, but I had to just freestyle this. Man, go ahead and take it away. Go ahead and sing my own shit.
I couldn't bear to leave you all alone. The loss of your life might as well be my own. And though my own energy has all but wasted away, I'll search my heart for some light to guide us both through this dark day. So I sit with you in quiet cadence, searching for comfort in this silence, reassured that the drugs won't claim our lives today. Oh, there is still the heaviness of sorrow and uncertainty for a safe tomorrow. But inside I hold a solemn promise that I will not leave your side. 'Cause dead crows cannot fly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Got a shout of the audience.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
That's our
I think
show.
we're wrapped up.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
Come see us next month.
Come see us next month.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
For the Instagram.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.